7:00. So shall we get started? You ready?
So.
All right.
So.
We are
Great.
ready.
You're ready. Well, welcome everyone to this round of Armchair Traveler. We're so happy you could join us tonight. With us tonight, we have Alain Ouellette and Norm Guerette, and they are going to tell us about their 600-mile bicycle trip from Kittery to Fort Kent. And I just want to thank our supporter for this event, which is Bath Savings, and of course, the Patent Free Library. And I will let you guys take it away. Oh, one more thing. If anyone has any questions, put them in the chat. We will have a question and answer session at the end of this talk. So if you think of anything while you're watching, feel free to put that in right in the chat. All right, Excellent. Take it away.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Alain, or Alan, for those of you who don't want to hurt themselves pronouncing my name. And Norm, introduce yourself, chum.
Norm Guerette. Nice to meet everybody. Thanks for joining in.
Norm, just so you know, I hid my crutches and wheelchair out back so no one will see the effects of a 600-mile bike trip. Just you know.
I think that's advisable. That's a good idea. That's good protocol.
Well, good. What we put together here is sort of a day-by-day chronology of key events and experiences that we went through. But before we do that, I just thought we'd just like to describe to you who we are and the friends that we have, especially a few other friends that we've had over the years. And as it was indicated in the newspaper, Norm and I believe, was back in, I think it was kindergarten or shortly after that we became friends, and we've remained friends all of these years. So it's with that in mind that we thought we'd begin with our little slide here. Every time I see an adult on a bicycle, I no longer despair for the future of the human race. H.G. Wells was certainly right about that. So let's begin. Norm, why don't you give us a first shot?
Yes, I will. So this is the beginning and the end, and what we're going to talk about is everything in between. But we started on September 6th, which was Labor Day 2021, and we ended on September 17th. So we had 12 days on the road in order to complete our 600+ mile journey. And you can see that we don't look a lot different at the end than we did at the beginning. Even though we're wearing the same clothes, I want to assure you that we did have opportunity to do laundry during that time, because if we hadn't, it would... it would have not been pretty.
No, they would have known. They would have known we had arrived. Yeah.
They would have smelt us coming.
Yeah.
So this is let's go to the next slide, Al.
Okay. Whenever we take on projects of this type, we always want to ask ourselves why do we do this? So I figured Norm might begin with the why. Norm, take it away.
So just quickly to give you an idea of where I was coming from, I retired in 2020. I retired on January 3rd, and on January 5th, I was on my way to Florida, and ended up spending a nice time in Florida. But something called COVID-19 happened in March, which had us scurrying back to Maine much sooner than we had anticipated. And I remember that April in Maine being so cold and wet, and feeling like I somehow just got cheated out of some warm, sunny weather in Florida. So in any event, as time wore on, I get kind of antsy, and post-retirement, I just wanted to do something, what I call is do something big, something noteworthy. I'm looking for an adventure, looking for a personal challenge, and also looking for something that I would remember, for a long time, and hopefully, something that my family and maybe my grandkids could talk about someday.
Absolutely. Yeah, excellent. For me, we were all experiencing the ravages of COVID, and despite all of that, there was this internal desire to have some sort of an adventure. But it began with my own idea of possibly hiking, and some of you in the audience may be familiar with the Camino in Spain, the Camino del Santiago, and that was my original goal. But because of COVID, I wasn't able to do it. But this need for adventure, that desire still was there within me. And so we'll go on and explain to you how this all evolved into the trip that we made. The personal challenge, yeah, it was. I mean, let me point out one thing. Norm is considerably older than I am, but despite that, we still had, common interests and common desires, and a personal challenge was something that we thought would be nice to do together. So that was important for us. For a trip like this to be successful, I believe anyway, that undeniably, that a friendship between us was critical. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to agree on everything, but that we know one another well enough to be able to work off our strengths. And in so doing, we ended up with an experience that will live on, as Norm appropriately described. So our friendship was critical. Now, when we speak of friendship, perhaps let me begin. We've known, this is the five of us who have been going to Baxter State Park fly fishing for, I don't know how many years, Norm, but all of us, yeah, and all of us have grown up in Fort Kent, and every single one of these guys is a very special friend to one another. And so when ideas like this started floating around, they were part of the discussion. And I owe a lot of our interest and support to these guys. Jean-Yves to the left. Oh, no, by the way, these aren't the Oak Ridge boys. I just wanted to point that out. I just want to make sure you all were aware of that. But to the far left is Jean-Yves, and we commonly know him as Jet. Bottom left, Bob Netto. Seated at the right is Bob Daigle. We also have a name for Bob. I don't necessarily think he would. I don't think he minds. I don't think he has any way to prevent us. But his name is Wrong Way, and so there's a reason for that, and perhaps someday we'll get into the reason why. So these are the guys. Norm, why don't you?
Yeah, I'll give you a brief chronology of how this came about, because I mentioned that we started, or at least I started thinking about this in 2020 post-retirement. So in 2021 in January, we had a Zoom call with the group that I'll refer to as the Baxter Boys for lack of a better term right now. So I kind of, put the idea out there just for people to think about and get comfortable with the idea, see if there was any interest. And then we had, I think, another Zoom call probably in February to kind of gauge interest and see, whether this was going anywhere and so on. And it was interesting at first. There was a lot of, wow, that's a great idea. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And then, well, I'm not sure I could do the whole thing. Maybe I could do part of it. And then there was like, well, maybe I could be like the support vehicle. I'd set up camp for you guys at night, and then I'd break it down and set up camp for you the following night and have a nice meal for you when you get there. I was thinking, you know, they can do 60 miles in about an hour. It's going to take us all day to do 60 miles. There's going to be a lot of boredom there, and this just isn't going to work. So the more we talked about it, the more it became clear that the one person that this really struck a chord with was Alain. And that by the end of our trip, our fly fishing trip in June, it was clear that this was going to be a bike trip of two. And that's what it became.
And that's what it became.
So,
and then,
you know, for the rest of the summer, Al, I'll let you talk a little bit about training and preparation.
And to preface that, Norm is the one with the bike touring experience. Norm has been in Europe. He's biked in France and elsewhere. I, on the other hand, had never done anything like this. But, you know, I had that fire in me that I was going to keep up with Norm. And he was on a bike. I think that was once owned by Lance Armstrong. Is that the one, Norm? Is that the one? I, on the other hand, yeah, I was on a much bigger frame and bigger tires, but I figured what I was going to do is with training that I would overcome that handicap. And so that's what we did, is we trained from July through August, daily almost. You know, I needed a bike. I had a mountain bike, which I knew I could never use for a trip like this. So I'll never forget this. When I was telling Norm, Norm, just, you know, don't sell my bike for the price I told my wife I paid, because it was more than that. She's sitting here as my witness. But what we were doing is trying to gather as much intel as we possibly could so that we can make this trip worthwhile, and to not be in a condition physically and mentally that we would be more of a hindrance to the other guy. So that pretty much was the framework within which July through August was spent. And I enjoyed every minute of it. I tracked how far I went, and it was really a lot of fun. And then finally, you know, September 6th arrives, and Louise and I are driving down to Scarborough, to Norman Treese's home, bikes on the back, and the journey begins. What I did here is I assembled just a collage of photos, and what I was trying to convey here is that there was some time where we were together doing various trips. One at Joe's Country Store, which some of you know is up in St. Francis, Maine. That was one of the bike trips that we did together. And along the way, we'd meet some old, dear friends. We also stopped at a, as you can see, at the gravesite of a friend of ours, a mutual friend of all of us, Peter. And it was a very important moment for me. It was one where the spirit of Peter and all that he did in my life came through, and I just simply reached out and said, "Chum, you'll be with us this entire trip and we'll be fine." And so that's why I inserted that particular photo. And off to the left, obviously, are the various iterations of what I packed and how I assembled it and where it went and how I could get it all onto that bike that you see on the bottom left. And it fit. The one thing that I'll point out that's a little bit unusual for a person on a bike is a CPAP machine. I suffer from sleep apnea, and so I had to compensate for that in some way. And so the first thing that was packed away was my machine, my sleep apnea machine and CPAP machine, along with a battery. What I failed to realize is that the battery alone is 4.5 pounds, and so it immediately started shifting the weight from one end of the bike to the other. And so we kept kind of rearranging things to make sure that it was properly balanced. And so, you know, it was part of that preparation process. And I enjoyed that kind of thing. Drove my wife crazy, but that's okay. She survived. Norm, anything to add?
No, I think that's very well covered. And you, I think, are more of a gear guy than I am. But we both had what we needed to get the trip done. You were in need of a new bike, and so was I. So you did the right thing by going to a bike dealer and buying a brand new bike. And I did what a deal finder does, and I went to Craigslist and found my bike there. But we both had something to ride.
Yeah, exactly. Folks have asked us, what did this trip look like? I mean, where does it show up on an app? And so what I did is I transferred. Some of you are familiar with KML files and all of that. I wasn't. I had to learn rather quickly. So from the app that we were using, and we'll get into that particular app in a few moments, what I did is I transferred that data onto Google Earth. And what you see there are the 12 segments. Whoops, what you saw there were the 12 segments of our trip, beginning in Kittery and working our way north. We used Route 1 as sort of the main arterial, but we did take on some wonderful diversions. And as you can see, we'll get into each one of those, but this is an example of some of these diversions going out to Lubeck and such. And it was truly worth it. I enjoyed every bit of it. So I don't know if you have anything else to add to the map.
Yeah, Al, while that slides up, I just want to point out that if you were going to go from Kittery to Fort Kent, the most direct route would be, going up 95, probably to Holton, then taking Route 1 and then Route 161 to Fort Kent. And that's 390 miles.
Yeah.
If you were going to follow Route 1 and not do any diversions at all, the entire length of Route 1 in Maine is 520. It's 526 miles.
Right.
So it just goes to show how going way down east and then going north extends, the journey. And, because of the side trips we took, we logged, a little over 600 miles. So, I mean, there's a quicker way to get from the southern tip to the northern tip of Maine, but that wasn't our objective. We wanted to do Route 1, and that's what we did.
That's exactly right. Some of you may remember Carl Sagan, and that particular quote is something that I always enjoyed. So I figured I'd share it with all of you. If constellations had been named in the 20th century, I suppose we'd see bicycles. So in our opening remarks, we spoke about how we could convey our trip in a concise and organized manner. And we initially began with locations, and that grew old rather quickly. Norm came up with the idea of using a chronology using our day-by-day trips. And so what you're going to see here is really that assemblage of photos and comments. So we'll begin with our first day of the trip. And you'll note not only you're going to see photos taken of that particular location or that particular leg of the trip, if you will. You'll once in a while see one of these little guys, these little links. And these links are links to a travel app that I've been using for quite some time. And I thought maybe we'll share an example of this with this particular slide. But again, it wasn't just the two of us, as Norm was saying. There are people behind that were, a very important part of the organizing and the planning, and quite frankly, the support for getting us to do this. Some of us have quite a sense of humor, as Norm's wife did with Steph, but that's okay. That's okay. We all had fun with it. And these are sort of an assemblage of those photos. So let me get on with, unless you have something else to add, Norm?
No.
Okay. So I'm hoping that this will give you an indication. All Trails is an app that is not a complicated app, but it does just the kinds of things that Norm and I were looking for. What it did is it gave us a map rendition of one day's trip, if you will. And so this being day one, as you can see, we ran our bikes from Kittery all the way up to this point right here, a distance of 52 miles. So again, to your left, you'll see some of the important data that we thought might be nice. Speed being one, obviously, distance, and our elevation gain, which was, we had a difficult time understanding what elevation gain meant, but at least it gave us some idea of why so many hills. That's where it shows up. And then over here, what you'll see is for every mile, you'll see where we traveled in terms of elevation. So things got a little funky here towards the end of the day at about 38 miles, 39 miles. That was quite the climb. So it just gave us a really nice report card of our daily travels. And we attached some photos as well. So you'll see, as I said, you'll see that in subsequent slides. So I just wanted to show you that. And
so
go for it.
Yeah, so on day one, I started, well, first of all, we didn't know when we started this trip that we were going to be doing a presentation, about our travels. So our photo taking is very sporadic. There were some days where we felt, maybe there weren't that many things to photograph, and on other days there were a lot more. So I also started journaling at the beginning of the trip, and that fell by the wayside after about 3 days. But I'm just going to read you quickly what I wrote for the first day, just to give you an idea of what we did. So 9 a.m. drove to Kittery with Al, Louise, and Teresa to begin our bike trip. We were on the road by 10 a.m. under beautiful sunny skies. We went up Route 1 to York and then took 1A along the water to Ogunquit. And we did that because this being Labor Day, there's a lot of traffic. A lot of the traffic was southbound. Of course, we were going northbound, which we were going basically against the flow of traffic, which was good for us. But by taking 1A, we eliminated even more traffic. Mm. And, we saw many beautiful homes and resorts along the way. And there were a lot of people at the beaches. In York, you've got Long Sands Beach, and we rode right along that. It was very picturesque. We stopped at Nubble Light for a photograph that was in the previous slide. And Nubble Light is not the most photographed lighthouse in Maine. That honor belongs to the Portland Headlight, but it's a very popular lighthouse. And we did, like all the other tourists, we had our photo taken there. So then we continued on 1 all the way to the Saco-Scarborough line. We took the Eastern Trail the rest of the way. And we got home at around 4 o'clock after having done 52 miles. And the shocking thing about that was that after our wives dropped us off in Kittery, they went to the Kittery trading posts and all the little shops in Kittery. Then they had lunch and they dilly-dallied along the way. And they probably got home about an hour before we did. And they were shocked that we pulled in as early as we did. So after having trained, and my longest training one was probably 45 miles, to have done 52 miles and be done by 4 o'clock, we thought, we can do this. It's a really good start, and it really built confidence in our abilities. So this is day 2. There are more photos here. You get photos of our hosts and photos of my daughter, who helped put the hosts and the bikers together. And I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier. I'm going to read you what I wrote about day two, because I think it aptly describes what we did. So that first night, since I live in Scarborough, I slept in my own bed that night, and Alan and Louise stayed with us at our house. So we departed. We left 17 Juneberry Lane, my home in Scarborough, at 9 a.m. and headed to South Portland and across Casco Bay Bridge. We hit Route 1 just north of Portland and stopped in Freeport for lunch. The Rogers Sandwich Shop. There, we met a couple of older ladies. And one of them asked me if I was biking with my dad. And of course, I had a good laugh about that. Immediately relayed that story to Alan. Vowed to him that I'd make sure he never forgot that comment. And then upon further reflection, decided that, those ladies were very astute and very observant. Mm-hmm. And they were onto something there. So anyway, we had a good laugh about that. And of course, Alan was a good sport about it. Sure. And then we after lunch, we continued our trek. And Alan, you may not remember this, but later in Brunswick,
there are things. Excuse me, Norm. There's something like the two ladies in Freeport. I was hoping to forget that, but thank you for reminding me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. No, there's no forgetting that one now. So later on, this is what I wrote about our day. I said later on in Brunswick, we met a dude at 7-Eleven who wanted to know if I was an agent. We settled on me being in the FBI, mm-hmm. and he was in the CIA.
Yep.
We served together sometime, somewhere. It was very random, to say the least. And we got a chuckle out of that also, that you just never know who you're going to meet and how things are going to turn out.
Yeah.
But it was very random, and it was one of the fun things you do when you're on a trip. So Alan, I'm going to let you talk about our hosts and our accommodations.
Actually, I would prefer that you do that. But the one comment I'd like to make is, if you notice, there was a small casualty along the way here. And if you note at the bottom here was this fancy Fuji top of the line racing bike leaning up against a tree with a 2x6 beneath what should have been the wheel. And we knew, it certainly needed some repairs because the tire was flat, had been flat for a little while. And I was immediately reminded, I looked at that bike and I was reminded of how people who are desperately in need of some miraculous healing will go off to a place outside of Quebec City called Sainte Anne de Beaupré. And I was thinking, now, if this were taken with us to Sainte Anne, what would we hang up on the wall? There are crutches there are wheelchairs as well. So I thought that 2x6 might be a nice symbol for a full recovery at Sainte Anne de Beaupré. Obviously, we weren't able to do that, but Norm was able to repair his tires, and we were fine within an hour. So all went well. So introduce our hosts, Norm, if you could. Wonderful, wonderful people.
I will, Alan. And back to the bicycle for just a second. That may be a casualty. That may be a casualty of buying a bike on Craigslist versus buying a bike from a dealer. The tires were old, and sure enough, they didn't stand up to the abuse. So our hosts for the evening were a lovely couple, Roberta and Bob Jordan, who have this beautiful rustic little cabin in West Bath. And in the photo, you'll see a photo of Alan and me and my daughter Emily. Emily was working with Roberta at the patent-free library. And when I asked Emily, I said, geez, we have some arrangements made along the way for accommodations, but we really don't have an accommodation in Brunswick. And would you know anyone? And immediately, like the next day, she says, well, first of all, she said, well, I'll ask around. And then the next day she says, well, you know, Roberta that I work with has a cabin in West Bath that you'd be, you know, more than welcome to, you know, to use for the night. So it was a godsend.
Yes, it was.
The Jordans brought salad and soft drinks, and Emily brought pizza. And cold beer. And we just had a great evening, you know, chatting with our new friends and just enjoying the surroundings of this cabin. And it's on an island. You'll see the ramp to take us there. And I think there's a video later on of us biking over the ramp, but it was such a nice and cozy cabin, and just a great place to stay for our first night, you know, on the road, being away from home.
On the road, absolutely. It was fun. Okay, so let's see. Whoop, did I go one too many? It's hard to control here. There we go. Day 3, et tout fini. My one remark here is it has to do with the photo on the left. It's one thing to be challenged, you know, with a hot sunny day, but we were beset with a lot of hills, and I thought I was in sufficient shape to be able to make these hills. But this is one of those days where I think lack of hydration, perhaps. I was lucky to be standing, as you see there. It was a tough day for me, and so we wanted to stop at some place to eat. Norm was far more familiar with places to eat than I ever was, so he decided, Alan, you need to stop at Moody's. So that's what we did, and it was just a total recharge. I felt wonderful afterward. They couldn't stop bringing me water, but it was well worth it. It was a truly wonderful day, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Norm, I think this might be something we want to look at. Okay. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
All right, Norm. Have a great ride, Monte.
That's escaping the island right there at
right.
Around 8:30 in the morning.
That bridge was very symbolic for us. It was really that connection between where life was familiar to a new life, which was just absolutely adventuresome. It was an excellent experience for the two of us. So I thought I'd throw that in there as a reminder to Norm and I about how important that little bridge was to us.
So that day, day 3, we started off the day with a flat tire, which Alan described, and our goal that day was to make it to Rockland, which we did eventually make it to Rockland. I'd say probably later on during the day. I suffered another flat tire on the same tire later on that day. And I just want to take a moment here just to talk about the road conditions and what skinny tires, you know, mean on a road trip, because these were old tires, and in the tires, the way they're constructed, there's a fine wire mesh. And as we were traveling on Route 1 on the shoulders, a lot of times the shoulders of the road are paved, but they haven't been repaved the way the travel lane has been. So the shoulders are very cracked. Every time you go over those shoulders on a bike with skinny tires, you really feel the pounding, and that I think takes its tolls to the point where the tire broke down, and these tiny little wire meshes inside the tire just were puncturing the tubes. So we hadn't figured that out yet at this point. So when we got another flat tire in Rockland, this time we replaced and put in a new tube. And that lasted for quite a while until we had another flat tire at some point. Then we realized that the tire was the problem. And fortunately, I had a spare tire. We put that on and were able to make it the rest of the trip. But that's one of the lessons you learn when you undertake a bike trip, on roads that are not always the smoothest.
Belfast was an interesting stop for us. Our bikes needed work. We weren't entirely sure if there was a bike shop there, and so all of a sudden we discovered that, sure enough, CG Bikes in Belfast, teamed up by the people you see there. This is Chris, and that's Mike. Took very, very good care of us. Mike was a terrific mechanic. Norm's bike, I think you needed some work done on your bike. I know what mine did. And they dropped everything. Once they heard that we were boys from the county heading off from Kittery to Fort Kent, they went out of their way to help us out. And while they were working on our bikes, we needed lunch. And so we found a 4-star dining experience, as you see right there. She was wonderful. She gave us, I don't recall exactly what it was, but it was just outstanding. It was fun. And we chatted with her, and she fed us well. And so it was, all in all, it was a terrific experience for us. Go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, no, we had the greatest hot dogs that I think you could find anywhere on the mid-coast. This food truck had been there for years, and it had a very loyal following.
Yep. So
we were glad to be able to experience that and get fed at the same time. Yep. Also on this day, the forecast was for heavy rain. And did we ever get heavy rain? They got about 3 inches of rain that day in about an 8-hour span. And much to our credit, I think, we pedaled through the whole thing. And I mean, the water was falling on the pavement, like, those spikes that jump up when the raindrops hit the pavement. It was coming down really hard. But the nice thing about having a predetermined destination is that we had friends, Jane and Craig Crawford, that were going to host us that night. So we figured, hey, look, we can get soaking wet, but we know that we can dry off tonight. And that's exactly what happened. Yep, exactly what happened. I mean, I think we had to empty our sneakers when we got there. I mean, we were still quite wet. But knowing that you've got a dry place to stay that evening just kind of makes it easier to push through.
An old French Canadian phrase for the kind of rain that we pedaled through. Some of you may remember this. The farmers up in the valley would say, "Il mouillait comme des clous," and as Norman aptly described it, the clous are nails. It was coming down so hard that they would splash up and look like nails, des clous. And so that I remembered that tonight as we were commenting on our presentation. I thought that would be nice. So day 4 came to an end, and here we are arriving at Jane and Craig's, our hosts and hostess, right center stage. The most wonderful pair of people you'd ever want to meet. And they were the ones that felt sorry for us as we got there. We were soaked to the bone. but it was a day to remember. It was great to have friends like that waiting for us when we arrived.
Yeah, you're looking at my my bedroom back there in the travel trailer, and unfortunately for Craig and Jane, they were in the process of moving. I mean, unfortunately that we showed up the time that we did,
Right.
because their house was not totally packed up, but it was well on its way, and they were getting ready to move, but still very generous of them to host us and accommodate us and let us dry our clothes and shower and get cleaned up. So all is well, that ends well.
Absolutely.
And along the way, we found, I think this was in Prospect.
Yep.
There was a fellow that was looking for something, Alan.
Yeah, he mentioned something. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying. Something about contact lenses, but perhaps it was something else. But that's all I could hear. And so we were there. We thought we'd help out, but while he was, busy doing what he was doing, we thought it'd be a nice photo opportunity. So there we were. We took advantage of that. So I thought that was aptly described.
Yeah.
So moving on, Norm, give it a shot.
Well, the next day was a beautiful sunny day. After all the rain that we had, and we decided that we were going to take a detour on this day, do a little side trip and visit Scudic Peninsula,
Yep.
which we did. We did a fair amount of mileage that day. We just didn't go north that far because we took this rather long detour. And Scudic Peninsula, as many of you know, is part of Acadia National Park now. It's a beautiful spot, very well visited, and for good reason. It's just a beautiful venue. Waves crashing into the rocks. And Alan and I sat there, and we didn't have a lot for lunch that day, but I know we had some energy bars. And Alan and I were sitting on a rock, right. We're right next to each other. It was probably a foot between us. We were sitting on a rock having an energy bars, and I was probably having some peanuts, and Alan was holding his energy bar like this, probably on his knee or just balancing it, ready to take a bite. And then I feel something brush against my face, and a very bold seagull flew in between us, grabbed that energy bar out of Alan's hand, and flew off down the beach, stopped and had lunch.
It's certainly.
And Alan and I looked at each other and said, I can't believe what just happened. And then later on, maybe about 15, 20 minutes later, some lady came up to us that had been sitting in her car. Yeah. She saw the whole thing happen, and she came up and she says, I just want to tell you guys, you have a witness to what happened. She said, that was unbelievable. That seagull, just swept in and stole your energy bar like that.
Yeah. All that was left was the wrapper. And I did the right thing, Norm. I went down through the rocks, nearly killing myself. But I did pick up the wrapper, threw it in my bag. And that was my contribution to a very happy seagull.
And I do remember, Alan, that there were a couple of park rangers there. And yes. You happened to mention to the park rangers what had just happened.
Yeah.
And they kind of, do you remember what they said?
I'm trying to remember, but I don't. Know.
They kind of chuckled and gave you that, well, you're just a tourist kind of look. And they said, well, there is a sign out there that says, don't feed the birds.
Exactly.
Don't feed the gulls.
Yet another episode I tried to forget, but thank you, Norm. That's nice of you.
So you want to talk about our visit with Wrongway?
Yeah, off to the left there is a poignant photo because one of the Baxter boys, as we call them, wrong way, uh, drives the bus for the local University of Maine at Fort Kent. And I believe this was one of their trips. If not for soccer, it was for another event. But Norman had received a message on his phone, and it was wrong way texting us and saying, "Where are you guys? Where are you guys?" And I thought at that moment, I thought he was back home in Eagle Lake and just wanted to get a sense of where we were. Well, it just so happens that Wrongway had a bus full of students, as you see behind us, and he's saying, "I gotta see you guys. I gotta see you." And so we orchestrated this connection point along the way, and sure enough, we were there probably 10 minutes. And here arrives Wrongway with his crowd, with his crew, and it was just a great gathering. It was really fun. We were able to finally get a hold of one another and be able to share what we were so far experiencing. I thought that was pretty special. This marks, unless you had something to add to that, Norm?
No,
Okay.
we're good, Al.
This marks a really important point in our trip. And Norm wanted to make sure that we include a photo of the Wild Blueberry Heritage Center. Some of you, I'm sure, have seen this, and he felt that it was important enough for us to add it to our photo collection. And so I figured, well, if it's that important for Norm, we'll add it to our presentation. Now, what's important about this particular experience that day was that Norm was having problems with, I think it was your tie, or you wanted to get another tube, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right.
Yeah, why don't you go on with that? I'll follow up.
Well, well, first of all, this Blueberry Heritage Center is in Machias, and Machias being the blueberry capital of the world, probably. But as we entered Machias, there was a bicycle rally going on, and unbeknownst to us, it was the annual ride from the Bicycle Coalition of Maine.
That's right.
Who has an annual weekend of for bike enthusiasts. And what really struck us is that, of course, we sort of happened upon the scene where they had bands playing and people riding bikes and people doing bike repairs and so on. And we happened to get there on the tail end of that. I was looking for a tube and a spare tire. And by asking a few people, I eventually found somebody who had already packed up all of their stuff, somebody from a bike shop in Bangor.
Right.
But the guy said, "Hey, no problem. I can get my hands on that." He went into his van and came up with a tire and tube, which I bought from him at a very fair price, I got to say. And it just gave me the security of knowing that once we got in down East Maine, in Northern Maine, where there aren't as many bike shops, I'd have a spare tube and tire if we needed it. But the other thing that was notable about that event is Alan ran into, I think, the coordinator of the event,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked us where we were going and how long we'd been on the road and that sort of thing, because obviously we weren't just out for a day ride. And when we told them that we were headed to Fort Kent, this gal immediately volunteered that a couple years prior to that, the annual ride was held in Fort Kent. And the people from the Biking Coalition of Maine just could not say enough good about the people in the St. John Valley, the riding that they experienced, the beautiful, views of the St. John River Valley. And it just gave both of us a real sense of pride that, you know, we're from there, we're going there, and we're glad that you've experienced it too.
And it was remarkable because this all came completely unsolicited. They were genuinely happy with their experience in Aroostook County, so much so that they were looking forward to having another bike trip to the county. So we'll be ready for them as we were then. So it was a great experience, and as Norm indicated, it was really heartwarming. Now, once we arrived in Lubec, our intentions were to stay overnight, but the accommodations weren't really for us. And so we did decide to make a stop at a place called the Lubec Brewing Company. And this not only is a photo of me trying to hold Norm up, but I wish that off to the left, if you can just imagine, this was kind of a gathering spot for the folks in Lubec. Off to the left of that picture was a circle of, oh my goodness, there must have been, what, 16, 18 people all sitting around, chatting away about this, that, and, various stories they shared. And we just sat down, as shy as we are, we sat down and joined them and took on with the conversation. And we just learned so much about that region that it was a really fun experience. And I thought, well, someday I'm going to go back, and certainly not for the brew, but at least to know that Lubec is a very welcoming town. It was really a fun town. And I think, was that our head shop down here? Or is that later on in our presentation? Remember that? Is that the day we had stopped in the rain? Maybe not.
No, that's later on. That's later on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So off to Callus. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, being conscious, being aware of the time, Al, we're
going to move
the tube here. I think we're going to have to speed things up a little bit.
Yep, I agree.
But from Lubec to Callus was a beautiful day and a long ride along the St. Croix River, and this is an international site. That photo that you took. Yeah, I don't know that there's a lot more to say about that particular day. Just that when we got to Callus, we were very fortunate to find a hotel room, because they were having their annual or semi-annual mill shutdown, and rooms were very scarce. But Alan managed to sweet talk somebody into letting us have a room for the night, which was great. Now, the next day was what I would consider to be the most difficult day of our trip, because we went from Callus, which is at sea level, to Weston in Aroostook County. And it was an uphill climb. I swear it was uphill most of the way. I think we did close to 65 miles that day. And I can tell you that we were beat when we arrived at our destination. Now, the folks that we had stayed with earlier, Jane and Craig Crawford, had these friends in Weston. This was Bob and Bonnie Grant. They were most gracious when Craig contacted them and say, hey, we've got a couple friends that are biking up north. Would you be able to put them up for the night? And without hesitation, they welcomed us with open arms. They were gracious hosts. We had our own little cabin that you see in the background. They fed us a great meal, let us do laundry. And I even made a friend there. I made a friend named, what was my friend's name, Alan?
It'll come to mind. I don't remember.
I made a nice
Chummy
friend.
Chummy.
Yeah. How could I forget Chummy? Yeah. So friendly and so happy to be around people and to get some attention. So this was arguably probably one of the toughest days.
So again,
But it was,
thunderstorms. We decided rather than, we didn't tent out all that much, but we decided that at the end of that day to stay at the Ivy's Motor Lodge in Holton. We were met by a wonderful hostess. She was originally from Madawaska, knew me, and in fact we had worked together on some Acadian Heritage Council stuff years before. So she took good care of us, and that was our home for the night. So we went from the Nut House to Ivy Leagues, all in the course of one day.
Alan was a good guy to travel with because of all his contacts with municipal people and government people and business people. I don't think we went through a town where he didn't know someone.
Well,
so it came in very handy.
That changed this particular day, because if you notice down below us, there's this what would you call that? Kind of a gazebo, picnic kind of,
Yeah, exactly. Just a picnic table with a roof over it.
Tell them the one story that I'll always remember, and how we arrived at that location, and we'll call it good.
Yeah,
for that
this is a pretty good one. So we left Holton that morning. It was 120 miles to get to Fort Kent. And we debated whether we did this in 3 days or 2 days. And we came to an agreement that we were going to try to do it in 2 days, which meant that we had to go, approximately 60 miles per day. So we got on our bikes and, reasonably early in the morning and, drove through Mars Hill, Monticello, Mars Hill, Presque Isle, Caribou. And when you leave Caribou on Route 1 and you're going toward Van Buren, there isn't a whole lot there. There isn't anything really except a few houses and a lot of broccoli and potato fields. So I told Alan, I says, well, let's keep an eye out for, a nice grassy backyard. And, we can go ask the people if we could camp out overnight, and we're not going to disrupt anything. We just need some level ground to sleep on. So sure enough, at around, come 5 o'clock, we hadn't really found this place yet, but we had done our 60 miles and we were really looking. So I spot this picnic table with a roof over it and a nice lawn around it. And I said, Alan, there's our spot. As we were turning into the driveway, this car was turning in also.
Yeah. And
it was a lady driving the car. She rolled her window down and I said, do you live here? And she said, no, this is a daycare. I'm going to pick up my son or daughter. And I says, oh, really? I says, well, who were the people? Because we were going to go and ask them if we could stay there. And she says, well, it's the Michauds. And I thought for a minute and I said, would that be Leonid? And she says, yeah, it's Leonid. And come to find out, I worked with Leonid for years. I worked for Dead River Company. So did Leonid. And I knew of him. I had met him and he knew me. And he's also my sister-in-law's brother. So when we pulled into Leonid's place and, got a look at each other and explained who we were, because we hadn't seen each other in a little bit of time. He said, he says, you are welcome. Go up there by the picnic table, set yourself up. We got water down here. Whatever you need, just let us know. So he turned the lights on. He had some I don't know what I'd call his Christmas lights around his picnic table. He turned that on for us, and you see a photo there of Alan's tent that was pitched up, and there's a photo next to the picnic table of my hammock, because I was camping with a hammock. And so we spent the night there. The following morning, they had us down to the house for coffee and donuts. And it was just a great feeling to know that we were in the county. We had met some very familiar people.
Oh, it was great.
Again, very gracious people. And we had a great night's stay there. And the next day we were homeward bound.
Homeward bound we were. This probably best describes, at least for me anyway, the feeling that I had once I saw the sign for Aroostook County. I truly felt excited. I was exuberant. I was anxious to see how this was all going to come to a rightful conclusion. And so along the way, some of the buildings that we see there, the architecture, the memories for some of us. Norm had quite an encounter with these two horses, which you can talk about. But along the way in Madawaska, it was just the right moment for one of us to stop and get some ice cream, and it was a perfectly timed stop. Saw some good friends, met with some good people. None of them believed that we did the trip that we did, but it was fun nonetheless. So, Norm, anything you want to add about those horses, or?
No, Al, I think we probably want to maybe want to go through the remaining slides and see if there's any last minute questions, because I think we've used up whatever time was allotted to us. Yeah,
there are only a few left.
So we'll just let people read these. Those were our takeaways from the trip. And in the meantime, if Hannah has any questions that we can answer, I know we both talk too much, but we'll answer a couple questions if we can.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was such an exciting story. I've got a couple questions lined up for you. If anyone else has anything they want to know, just put it in the chat. To start off, when you were training, how far and how often did you ride?
You can start with that, Norm.
Well, I tried to ride 2 to 3 days a week, and my training runs were various lengths. I'd say anywhere from maybe 25 miles to 40 miles. My longest training run was like 45 miles. And I took my bike with me up to where Alan lives in Fort Kent, because there are a lot of hills in Fort Kent. And that was great training ground up there.
It was pretty much the same for me. I believe I was on my favorite trails maybe 3 or 4 days a week. It was a daily routine. It became a necessary daily routine. I don't know if that rings true for anyone watching and listening, but sometimes you start these daily habits and they become an important part of your routine. And so I felt every day, as every day came along, I felt more confident about this trip and how anxious I was to take advantage of the opportunity. So, yeah.
That's so great. Do you have any advice for other people who might be wanting to take on their own bike adventure?
I'd offer a little bit of advice. One is that training is important, because you're going to get saddle sore, and your legs and your cardio and everything is going to hurt if you haven't trained. And the other thing is, if you can arrange it so that you don't have to bring camping gear, you'll really lighten your load. We didn't bring any. We brought sleeping accommodations. That means sleeping bag, either a tent or a hammock, and a pad to sleep on. If you didn't have to bring all that, you'd just be lighter on the road. We didn't bring any cooking gear. We didn't bring any pots and pans or anything like that. We did a lot of gas station pizza and sandwiches and snacks and so on. Mm-hmm. So the lighter the better would be any advice I could give.
I think on a more personal front, who you're with makes a huge difference. And I'd like to think that Norm was on occasions was really my source of strength. There were times where we were climbing hills and I kept thinking to myself, I don't know if I can make it to the top of this. And right behind me, I'd hear Norm, we can do this, so it was great. I think we worked well off one another.
Well, we are about out of time, so I'm just going to finish with one question that someone has asked that I know we are all wondering. What is next for you two? Another bike adventure or something else?
Go ahead, Al.
we've only talked briefly, but you know, COVID. I'm from Canada originally, and I've always had a connection with you know, adventures in Canada, and these last 2 years just made that impossible. Skiing in Canada, hiking in Canada, all those things just went by the wayside. But there are a couple of trails that I presented to the group not long ago, one of which was the Cabot Trail in Nova Scotia that I think would be interesting. Another one was the Gaspé Peninsula, another location that I think would be a lot of fun. And then a third one, which I don't think many people are aware of, but off the St. Lawrence Seaway to the north of us, across from Rivière-du-Loup, is a ferry boat that brings us to a little town called Saint-Simeon. And along that thoroughfare is what's called a stretch of river that would bring us to a town called Chicoutimi. And that river is absolutely phenomenal. The name escapes me, I forget. But that would be another trip that I would like to do. But who knows? We'll see. We'll see.
So, Hannah, thank you very much, and
Yeah.
thank the folks that you know, that let us share our trip with them.
Yeah, thank you
We
both
enjoyed
so
it,
much.
and, hope you did too.
Yeah, this was terrific. Thank you all for coming tonight. And we do have one more Armchair Traveler talk in this series. It's April 6th, and it is called Every Bird in Maine. It's the story of a Maine big year with a birder named Ethan Whitaker, who is from Wiscasset. So we will hope you will tune in for that last talk as well. And thank you both again for sharing your adventure with us. Have a good night, everyone.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.